I guess as way of background, we all are quite aware of many studies being carried out in many parts of the country. There's a wealth of information in a lot of flood studies as far as flood depths, extents, velocity, depth, even floor heights. So I guess a lot of that information is hasn't really well been utilised. So stepping back in the big picture is when we did the regional floodplain management strategy, which has just got finalised. One of the biggest findings of that is the sharing of information, so people can use or access the information for a number of purposes. One purpose is for planning and building, the 1% levels, but not just that. It's a range of statistical events, AEPs, if you like, so you can price insurance as well. So that's another good piece of information. But more importantly, within the Goulburn Broken Catchment Management Authority, we're quite fortunate to have a lot of gauge relationships with flood extents and flood intelligence, if you like, and to utilise intelligence and sharing of vulnerability of flooding over floor and over property, and at what height or gauge do I get into trouble, so to speak. So how do we package all that information up? There's been a challenge to make it simple, but not too much words around the information that people getting, and one of the good things is having that information at your fingertips. It really does present an opportunity for us at CMA to have less resources to manually write letters or field phone calls, and so in terms of resources, it's a good way of sharing information without taking our time up as well. So the benefits moving forward is really the resource issue, sharing the information, getting communities more resilient and against floods. One of the COAG meetings in risk management in Australia talked about emergency services can't be at hand all the time. So it talks about people really need to have a responsibility for self-help and manage themselves during major floods. So this information will certainly help in that space and in the emergency management space as well. So I don't think I need to say too much more, and I just think the project is fantastic. And probably last point is I want to say is the hydro logic. It points to one source of information, one source, one truth, which is really important. All your property information is a bitmap source, and ultimately everything will get in terms of flood intelligence, and we'll get directly into what the flood zooms, the statewide flood zoom platform. So it's another good. The architecture is quite sound from that perspective, with one source, one truth. On that note, I hand over to Brian to actually show the portal. Thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you, Guy. Yeah, I also just wanted to add, just from my own previous experience when I was still in South Africa and also heading up a catchment authority, is my experience with sharing information in a better way, and the transparency and trust that creates with your community. Our experience was managing a river in the Kruger National Park with massive conflict and nothing really working, and only through starting the process of actually getting the information and sharing it through a portal such as this, that we, over the course of a number of years, get enough trust building because of our open door policy that we could actually start making decisions and get the river flowing again. So this need to create trust by being transparent and open with your information does build the confidence and does improve resilience at the end of the day, and from my experience as well. So just love to echo that as well. So I'm going to explain how this portal works, and when we were approached at the end of the flood study with all of these flood maps that we had done as water technology, Shepparton and Goulburn Broken also were recognizing the benefits that the current advances in ICT these days have brought to the table to improve service delivery and information delivery, things like web services and high-speed internet connections that we hopefully have these days, and other web technologies. So as the agents for HydroNet in Australia, there's a perfect platform that leverages a lot of these advances in ICT that we have these days to make pretty cool platform available. So HydroNet is a cloud-based software as a service subscription platform. There are many of them out there. This brings to the table a number of advantages. So cloud-based solutions, all of them, not just HydroNet, they provide all of these benefits. So users can access the information they need anywhere, anytime. They just have to log into their browser. The providers of that information don't have to have any further, and the users, no further hardware or software or IT costs. You just subscribe. There's also no maintenance, and well, the maintenance and support is included in your subscription. So your own hardware that you may need to support a database on your own services is all removed, but that all goes into the cloud and is part of that. And then you can share the costs as well, and updates made for one subscriber is then become available for all subscribers to the system. So there are quite a lot of benefits that we can bring to the table by proposing a cloud-based approach. The other particular benefit that a platform like HydroNet brings in is the digital delta approach. So it's more than just a cloud-based subscription solution. It embraces the digital delta approach. Now, what this means, as Guy alluded to, is that this platform links in real time, live links to the various data providers and products that are out there, brings them to you in one place. So these live links means that whenever you are looking at the platform, you are linking live to the data provider and getting the latest information all the time. And if that is from a number of different sources, it could be from a GBCMA's database, it could be from the Bureau of Meteorology's data as well. They're all linked and provided to you in one place through connections. So this enables those data providers to maintain the responsibility for that source and for you to view the master official database and the latest version of that. So there's no duplication or versioning issues that may otherwise be created when a copy of the data is actually put on somebody's server and then used to drive a web portal. In this case, there's no copying, just live links. So with those two sort of advances in ICT that give us this ability to now create a portal that's providing the latest data. So for the rest of this webinar, I'm basically just going to go over the functionality of that portal and show a little video of how it works as well, and then just highlight the features and perceived benefits that we believe will be made available. So accessing the portal, it's floodreport.com.au, but there will be a number of routes that you can access the portal. Obviously, the main route will generally be through the relevant CMA or council or responsible authorities websites that will have a link into the portal. Those links can also maintain the domain names and branding of the particular organization. So in this case, we're talking about the Goulburn Broken CMA and the Shepparton. So when you link to the portal, you're getting their particular branding. But that front page is an entry page into the portal that differs depending on the user. You accept the standard terms and conditions, and it takes you into the flood study area applicable. In this case, it's the Shepparton-Marupna flood study area, and this is what it looks like. I'm just going to go through exactly all the parts of this portal. At the top, you have a standard header bar with a number of tabs for showing the flood maps, for seeing the user guide, and for general information. Then you have the map display area, which has some navigation buttons on the top right, as well as a button to select different background maps on the bottom right. Then on the left-hand side here, you have where you interact with the portal the most. On the top is the area to search for your property of relevance. Below that an area to search for different flood maps to display. And at the bottom, an opacity slider linked to the flood maps to change the opacity of the flood map. You can also see the Goulburn River gauge at Shepparton displayed on the map. Now this is displayed, and if you mouse over it, it actually appears, the name appears. The reason this is actually displayed on the map is because a number of the flood maps that you can view are actually linked to water levels at the gauge, which is quite common practice. A lot of the community are very aware that 10 meters at the gauge implies a certain flood, and if you display the flood map for a gauge level of 10 meters, it is quite a lot more understandable than the jargon that hydrologists use, such as annual exceedance probabilities and these kind of design floods. So that's why the gauge is there, because a lot of the maps refer back to that gauge. So I'm just going to go through the functionality now. When you're starting with flood map selection, there's going to be a number of choices here. The first choice is to choose the type of flood map. Now at the moment, it's only showing flood depth, so you will see maps of how deep the flooding is, but it is also possible to show flood velocity and hazard if that information is available and is desired to be displayed. Once you've chosen flood depth, which is automatically chosen in this case, you then can choose from 3 different flood map types to display. Oh, I also want to just say in the beginning, at the moment we're also showing riverine flooding maps, so flooding from river catchments. But it will also be possible for a user, if that information is available and applicable, which is not the case here, to choose from coastal inundation flooding maps or overland and flash flood maps. So if studies have been done for overland or coastal flooding, then those can also be chosen and displayed. So the first flood map type is choosing a gauge level. So if you choose a gauge level, it'll show the flood map for that particular gauge level. The second option is the AEP, which is the annual exceedance probability. So the probability that a particular flood might happen in any one year. A 1% annual exceedance probability is equivalent to a 1 in 100 year flood, which a lot of people also understand is flood that on average may happen once every 100 years. And the final option here is some historic floods. In the Shepparton area, it's the 1974, 93, and 2010 floods that can be displayed. So if I choose the 1974 flood and click on Show Map, the flood map appears. You can zoom in and such. I've now just showing you the difference between some of these maps. The 1974 versus the 0.5% or 1 in 200 year flood map is quite a significantly larger flood than the 1974 event. So this is an example of the AEP flood maps. And this is a 20% AEP, or a 1 in 5 year flood. And you can see quite clearly that it's a much smaller flood. The last option that you can have if you're choosing a gauge level is, once you've chosen the gauge level, in this case it's 11.3 meters on the Shepparton gauge, you can then also choose a dominant river case. And in this case we're showing a broken Sevens Creek dominant river. Now there are a number of different tributaries. Broken River and the Sevens Creek are here on the right, and the main Goulburn River is here on the left. Now, 11.3 meters on the Shepparton gauge over here could be generated from a large flood in this particular catchment, or it could be generated on the Goulburn River itself, and those will have different flooding. So if I choose the Goulburn here, you can see that on the Sevens and Broken, there's a lot less flooding than a Sevens dominant flood. If I click back and forth between them. So this is quite important for users to be able to view and see that depending on which tributary a flood is coming down, it might be exactly the same depth at the river gauge, but you will be affected differently. So it's important to be able to view how differently you may be affected depending on where the flood is coming down. The next option available is obviously just changing the background map. In the bottom right here, you can choose between VicMap background or imagery, as well as OpenStreetMap background. And you can also change the opacity. 67% versus 39% opacity. It's quite nice to be able to view the background map through your flood map a little bit better if you can't quite see enough data. detail. You can also click on the clear map button to remove the map completely and just see the background if you want to navigate a little bit easier to where your property may be. Then the next step is actually getting a property report, which can be done in two ways. You can type your address into the address bar at the top left corner. If I start typing in 14 Victoria and I click on 14 Victoria Street, once I click on that, it automatically zooms to that location and highlights that property. I can then still zoom in and pan around a bit more if I would like to. The other way of doing this is actually just single clicking on the map itself. Once you've found your property, you can click on your property and that'll automatically zoom into the property as well and select it in the address bar, as I've shown here. Once you're happy that your correct property is collected, if you mouse over the property here, by the way, this indication also shows up to show which property is actually being selected. You can then click on Generate Report. Now, this is where the real magic happens. Once you select Generate Report, the portal in real time now connects to the VicMap property database and obtains the parcel property geometry from the VicMap database directly, not a copy of that. So as VicMap updates the property data every 2 weeks on average, when you generate this report for your address, you're making sure you generate it for the latest property boundary that's applicable to that address. Once it's got that geometry, it's then in real time linking that parcel to the flood map in the background and determining the maximum and minimum flood depths and the depth overflow and all that information and calculating that information and populating the table in real time and then downloading the report that's created in a PDF format for you. So this is embracing that digital data live links so that you're linking to the source official data and making sure that you are actually getting the latest information. This is what it looks like. Maybe just to explain a little bit, the two main tables that the report will provide you is a property flood information table on the first page, as well as a map, and a flood preparedness table on the second page, along with some definitions and further information and indication of the terms. The flood information table here is design floods at various design flood levels, giving you the minimum and maximum water level and water depth, as well as velocity and hazard for the property at the 1% design flood. We're choosing the 1% design flood here because that is the standard flood that's often used for planning purposes. But any of these levels can actually be filled in if that is desired. If there's a little dash here, then that basically means that there is no flooding at that flood event level. So the water depth is basically how deep the flood is above the natural ground level, and the water level is just the actual height of the water above average mean sea level. This water level data is actually important for the second table, where we are basically showing the depth of flooding over the floor level. So if there's a floor level survey data, as there is in this case, a survey has been done of all of the floor levels of the major buildings on a property. You can also get information for how deep you may or may not be flooded above the floor level, which is different to the depth above ground level. In this case, there's actually negative values here, which are showing that at the floor level point, there is flooding on the property, but it's below floor level. So you're not actually getting flooded above floor level. And this is shown for all the different gauges for all of the different dominance cases. And you can also get an indication here of a certain gauge level is equivalent to a certain design level. So 11.1 on the Shepparton is a major flood, 20% AEP, for example, equivalent to 20% annual exceedance probability. So I basically already explained, as we were looking at the property report, how it all works. So I'm not going to really do that again. The parcel is selected from the address. The VicMap is queried for the parcel geometry. It is intersected with the flood maps to produce the maximum and minimum information. And then once that's done, it's also intersected with the floor level survey database to create the floor level and depth over floor level. all in real time and downloads it. And if you actually interact with the portal, it normally takes less than 15 seconds to do all of this and download the report for you. So it's pretty fast. I'm now just going to, I made a video this morning of the portal, and I'm just going to play it and voice over it as I go along to give you an indication exactly how it works. So yeah, are we accepting the disclaimer? This will be simplified. It's still actually a draft disclaimer. Once we enter the portal, depth is already selected. I can choose a gauge height and a dominance case, and click show map, and the map displays pretty quickly. I can then zoom in and pan around, either just using my mouse and my mouse wheel, or double clicking as well on the map to zoom in. If I want to then change my map again, I can just choose a different map, in this case 12.3, neutral, click show map again, and the new flood map appears. Now just clicking on bitmap imagery to change the background imagery as an example. And also I can use the buttons on the top right to zoom in and out. If I click the home button there, yeah, if I click and drag, I can pan around. If I use the home button on the top right, it basically zooms out to the flood study area again. The final step then is to just type in an address or click on the map in the right location to select the address. Once I've typed in and selected the address from the drop-down list, it zooms into the property, and I can then generate the report. Once I click generate report. If I click it now, you'll see it took this morning about 10 to 15 seconds to download. So it's busy thinking, it's doing all of these calculations, linking to the VicMap database, linking to the flood study data, and then Bob's your uncle, it's just downloaded and it opens it up automatically in your PDF browser. And there are the 2 pages. So that was a pretty quick overview of the portal. The other 2, on the header bar, I indicated at the beginning that there is a general information and a user guide document. The general information document has been provided to give you a lot more flooding information that's relevant, but not property specific. So by splitting out the property specific flood information from just general flood information for the flood study area, we can limit the property report to a much smaller 2 pages and not a lot more. This general information document basically has got a list of all the definitions that are applicable, the flood gauges that are applicable, the flood level categories and explaining what those all are, as well as some planning and development information that is applicable and other resources and contacts. What you can see on the right here is the final page of that, which is resources and some good contacts. Then there's also the user guide that you can download when you're on the portal, which gives you a step-by-step instruction on how to use the portal, how to access it, how to select flood maps, how to do a property search and select a property, and finally how to generate a report. So to close off the webinar before we go to questions and give Guy another opportunity to also maybe talk to this, is just summarizing the features again and the benefits that we perceive can be made available. So the major benefit here is improving the service delivery and easy access for the public. The organization themselves, GBCMA and Shepparton, can provide this access directly via their own websites and therefore maintain their own branding. But the real benefit is that this is improving transparency, trust building, service delivery, and ultimately the resilience of the community and of individuals themselves and property owners themselves. Knowledge is power at the end of the day. It's also having a significantly reduced time and cost burden on the council and CMA staff that have to produce these reports manually up to date, and also on the public that have to ask for this information. The previous process was filling in an application form and submitting it and waiting for that to be done and sent to you, which was significant time penalty. So using the digital data approach has also enabled these live links for us to provide the official data source, the VicMap property data, and once available, the flood database at the flood zoom. and we're removing the difficulties of versioning and duplication issues. The reports are processed on the fly at time of request, so we're getting the latest data, and we're improving the flood information sharing to the public. They can now easily view anywhere flood maps for river run flooding, coastal flooding, as well as depth, velocity, and hazard maps. Choose between different types of floods like design, historical floods, and gauge level floods, and different dominance cases. So there's a wealth of flood map information that can be viewed and interacted in a pretty simple and easy to understand portal. The other benefits in our mind is that this is all using HydroNET, which is an international proven system that's been around for more than 10 years. It's used in 12 different countries around the world. So with that, international knowledge is brought to the table, but it's a customized local solution that can be customizable to the different users of the portal. And then the standard SaaS subscription cloud portal benefits that you get in your subscription. So all of the updates, all of the support you need, and the maintenance and the operation of this portal is all done by HydroNET as part of the subscription without any further investments needed. Definitely upgradable into the future as well due to this process. Something that we're already thinking about doing is being able to also provide zone-specific planning information in a report. So if you're a specific zone like industrial and in a certain flood hazard category, you'd get specific planning advice information that is linked to that. So Guy, I'm going to also maybe ask you to have some final say on perceived benefits, if you would like.
Oh, you've been fairly covered. I guess, in short, the platform in this particular case serves two purposes: one for statutory planning, insurance, and also for flood resilient communities having shared knowledge about the risk for overflow flooding around the property in that second table and second sheet. So I guess Greg and I and another staff member had a bit of a go last couple of days. I'm quite pleased at the moment in terms of usability. To me, I believe it's fairly intuitive to use without going in reading reams and reams and reams of background information. But if you want it, it's there. But I'm quite pleased with the usability at this point in time. I dare say there might be a few more final tweaks before we go, but overall I'm quite happy with the project.
Yeah, it's good to hear. It's very simple.
It's got Greg here as well.
Look, I think it's a terrific tool. I think the main thing from my point of view is that resilience, hopefully, that it builds in the community, and knowing that they got real-time information, I think is just fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
I guess what I like about the technology, again, I said this before, is about pointing to the right source, one truth, data and building. And I think Adam just had a comment pop up before, Adam done, about scalability. I think based on the success of this is we want to start scaling this up to other areas across the catchment. And so, Brian, did you want to talk about how this can get adopted for other areas of similar information? Is that from your IT viewpoint, there's any hurdles or what comments do you have on that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but because it's a SaaS platform and it's designed specifically to be able to be easily expanded and have other areas incorporated. So without having to do, if you have flood data, flood map study, and you have all of these flood maps, then it's going to be pretty quick. We're talking 3 months, order of magnitude, give or take, to get the flood maps into the portal and set up exactly to do this functionality that we've just demonstrated. Because it's a software subscription service, it's also has a pricing methodology that is based on a lot of users, and therefore it's a lot cheaper. We're pretty confident that doing it through an existing portal where most of this functionality has already been developed, it's just about configuring the new users' data onto that portal. It's quick. There's not a lot of once-off development costs that would otherwise be applicable. It's just small once-off configuration costs and then a subscription cost that's shared amongst a lot of users internationally even, and very cheap. So yeah, we'd love to expand it, and we hope that interest and these sort of ICT advances that we've shown of the digital data approach and linking to live data is useful. Just to say also, Guy, you're mentioning that this will help build resilience. I fully agree.
Yep.
I also think we should recognize that this is one aspect of many things that have to happen to build resilience, and we're playing our part as best as we can to improve information availability. And we also understand that it's a beginning of a journey, not the end of a journey. Creating that resilience is all about now getting people to trust and use and build that confidence slowly with a platform.
Yeah, that's right. I reiterate again. I guess I'm not guessing. It's fact that through the development of our regional floodplain management strategy, one of the biggest ticket items there is ability to share information effectively and efficiently. So I can't say anything more. So this looks like a perfect tool for that purpose.
Yeah. So if people are interested, then they're welcome to talk to us a bit more detail, and we can provide it.
Any questions?
Brian and Guy, we've got a number of questions coming through, but I'll just fire a few at you, some of which you've been able to answer as you've been talking. A little bit extending on from the configuration and the expandability of the scalability of the platform. There's a question about the report template. Is it possible to change the report template to meet a local instance?
Yes, it is possible. The standard once-off configuration cost that would be applicable would obviously be on a current template. But if a different template is desired, it can obviously be done. It would just be a case-by-case basis. Yeah, so it's possible. It would just take a little bit more configuration to do that, and that depends on exactly what is needed.
Thank you. Got another question about how many people can access the site at once, especially during a large-scale flooding event. So if there's a flood going across a region, and what's the demand capability of the site to manage that?
That's a very good question. I have no idea offhand exactly what that would be. It is based on HydroNET as a international SaaS platform, has a lot of intelligence built into it to manage traffic, and specifically when it's connected to databases, its web services ensure that those data providers, first of all, do not get inundated when there's a lot of queries. So it would shut down the platform if there's a lot of inundation, so that the data providers are protected. But it's able to handle tens of thousands of queries at a go. It's pretty much designed to handle a lot of traffic.
So when
the
you
first
mentioned
big flood event would actually be the proof of the pudding, I guess. But it's designed to theoretically handle enough traffic.
Thank you. Got a question around, is the information to the public being provided free of charge?
Guy, you can answer.
We did. Yes. I think so. We did talk about whether we should have a charge, so we can use that money for maintenance of the site. But then again, if you're really serious about having flood resilient communities, I think having it freely available just encourages more people to use it. So the answer is it's free.
That also could depend on organisations themselves. They have the choice, I guess, but we support free.
Great. We've got a question about AEP and ARI. So has there been any feedback from the community regarding the terminologies ARI and AEP, and whether or not the understanding, the level of confusion is in place, and what and when it's displayed as an AEP within the report based on the flood level classes. Have you ever thought about actually doing this where the ARI is also listed?
I don't know about community feedback, but in terms of the terminology and the jargon, we've tried to, under the report, there's notes to each table that give a description of what AEP means. And in the general information document, there's quite a lot of detailed description about AEP and ARI, annual recurrence interval, and what they mean. At the moment, it's chosen to show AEP because that's the accepted in the new the ARR 2016. That's the sort of accepted term that should be used. So if we're going to be producing an official report, we're using the official terminology and trying to explain it as best as possible. If anybody has a brilliant suggestion on how to make it even more clear, we're open to that.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge the whole industry is facing. But yes, you're right. As far as the Australian rainfall and runoff, that's been the terminology that's they're pushing. I think as far as their clarification, I think that's a big challenge for everyone in this space, communicating the messages especially in flood response areas.
It's Guy here again. Just on that, in the explanatory report, I think it's worth probably fleshing out a bit out. We probably need to look at that. But look, the Victorian Flood Strategy did debate this a little bit, and they decided to adopt the AEP. For my mind, I don't know how confusing the community is on that. We tend to, I guess for very large floods, it becomes nonsensical in my mind if you got the 0.05%, and so you're using 1 in 10,000, and so luckily enough, ours only go up to 1% and 0.5%, but beyond that, it does get a little bit tricky to understand what it is. But I've got no answers.
Yep. We have a question in relation to the platform and Flood Zoom. Can the actual platform access existing flood data directly from Flood Zoom? And if those outside of Victoria, you might want to just give a...
Okay.
Good question.
Doesn't access data in Flood Zoom at the moment, but it has definitely been designed and with the vision to be able to do that. The main reason it doesn't link to Flood Zoom is it's actually more correct to say the Victorian flood database in this case, or whichever flood database in whichever state is the official flood database. But in Victoria, it's the Victorian flood database. So Flood Zoom is something that's made for a specific purpose and is not a public access portal, but the Flood Zoom uses the Victorian flood database. It's just that the Victorian flood database at the moment is actually just a set of folders on a server, and all of the different flood map studies have been put in those folders. So it's not able to actually allow access via the internet through dynamic web services and these technologies. So currently DELP are in the process, have indicated that they are in the process of budgeting for and upgrading the flood database to enable this kind of access. So as soon as they have done that, which is a significant project in itself, the Victorian flood database will be able to provide access like VicMap does already, and then we will be linking to it. So the only reason it's not using it at the moment is just because it's not able to actually do it, even though they have the desire to make it available. It's not possible. It needs to be upgraded, which is in process.
Great. We have another question around the gauge data that's available through the bottom. So can it actually display gauge data live?
The flood portal, as it currently is not showing gauge data live. It can be done.
Yep.
if it's wanted. But that obviously every change in customization and addition that a subscriber would like just has its own associated development cost. It's normally not a lot, and then that becomes available for everybody.
Right.
But yeah, it can be done.
I guess just one word of caution. I guess from emergency management space, there's a flood zoom platform which has been developed by Dell, which a user's got to be trained to use the information and interpret that information. It's quite heavy. The purpose of this is entirely different. It's meant to be quite simple and for the public and easy to digest. So there are two different purposes. So yeah, look, the idea of having gauges on it could be useful from a public perspective, but I'm a bit cautious not overcomplicating things.
Yeah, I would say maybe if you're going to do that, limit it to the main gauge that it's all referring to. So in this case, the Shepparton gauge, you might want to just show a figure at most of what is the current level there. But that's a decision, I guess, that has to be made.
Thank you. This question's probably for Guy or Greg. Is it currently available through the council website?
No, it's not, but it's only because we haven't hooked into it yet. That'll be done fairly soon.
Just checking through that I've got most of the questions. There's some questions about what type of disclaimers are being used, given data reliability variations, missing data, etc.
They're pretty standard disclaimers and privacy and copyright statements in the terms and conditions that coming from Shepparton and Goulburn Broken. We had a lot of discussions with their legal departments, and in most cases they've done previous type of data provision portals as well for different data and have disclaimers and privacy statements associated with those, and we've pretty much based them on those. So it's all coming from Shepparton and Goulburn Broken's legal department, and they're pretty standard. The only change would be is there is a HydroNET license agreement that's in there as well, just on the HydroNET portal, and copyrights and disclaimers on that about information provision. But if you've read any particular disclaimer about information provision and how reliable it is and how it's not necessarily the official statement, you still have to apply for official planning permit to get the official answer. And although we try to get the information as good as we can, we're not guaranteeing it, and it's your responsibility to use it properly, and all those standard statements that are in there are part of it, and so on.
Great.
I hope that answers it.
Thanks for that. We've got another question around the system permissions. So can it be configured to recognise public users and authority users? Not sure if the person that asked the question wants to expand on that, but from a front end and back end, or public?
No, at the moment, it doesn't differentiate. So it's one user type fits all. So if you log into the portal and you go and you start interacting with the portal, it's not differentiating between different logins. So there's no login. It's not like other HydroNet applications where you can have logins for individual people even, and they can be differentiated. This is just a public portal meant to provide information to the public better. So it doesn't differentiate, and there's no login.
Great, thank you. Guy and Greg, is there anything more you would like to add as we wind up?
Not from Greg's point of view.
No, I don't have anything more to add at this stage.
Great. Well, thank you, Guy, Greg, and Brian for the presentation today.